What's good? It's your boy Fanon. All right. Welcome back to the channel. To subscribers, if people aren't subscribed, please subscribe and hit the bell icon so you can be notified of when we release more videos. And thanks to everybody that supports the channel on the super chats and the Patreon and the Venmo. Going to talk about the heavyweights right now and Luis King Kong Ortiz, the guy that in my opinion is definitely one of the top 3 heavyweights in the world. If Tyson Fury comes back and gets into full shape, then, we could argue that he's in the top 4. But he's going to be fighting on the undercard of Mikey Garcia versus Robert Easter on July 28th. And I'm really happy about that, man, because that means that Luis Ortiz is still in the mix. He's fighting a guy who he should be able to beat. He should be able to dominate pretty easily. It's more like a stay busy fight against a guy, Joe Hanks. Joe Hanks has been I think it's Joe the Future Hanks. But the most of the Future's career is in the past, and he's a guy that is has been pretty inactive lately. I think he's got a couple bouts in the last year or so, but before that he was maybe fighting once a year with some but so maybe like 4 times, I think, since maybe 2013 that he's been in the ring. But I'm really looking forward to the fight because it's another chance to showcase Luis Ortiz, a chance for him to, of course, earn some money, because I think Luis Ortiz is one of these guys that, if it wasn't for an organization like the PBC and Showtime looking to make sure that the best boxers get fights and are spotlighted on fight cards and really focus on that type of thing, that a guy like Luis Ortiz could easily be brushed to the side. I was really worried about Deontay Wilder giving him a shot at the heavyweight title, just because I know what kind of boxer Luis Ortiz is, and so does clearly Dillian Whyte and these guys who won't get into the ring with them. Of course, Deontay Wilder and Luis Ortiz fought. That was one of the scariest moments for me, and as a fight fan and somebody that was looking at Deontay Wilder as somebody that could either get with Tyson Fury or Anthony Joshua to be a unified champion. One of the most nervous moments that I had was when I heard that Deontay Wilder was going to face Luis Ortiz, because Luis Ortiz is a serious fighter. Now, the reason that this bout is happening, of course, is because Dillian Whyte ducked out of him. Now, Dillian Whyte does all this talking about how this guy's an old man and all that, but if he's an old man, get in the ring and face him, right? But I think we know the truth about why Dillian Whyte wouldn't want to get in the ring with Luis Ortiz. Luis Ortiz is he's a big, strong, heavy hitting. He's a better puncher than Dillian Whyte. He's a better boxer than Dillian Whyte. He's a southpaw. He's been in there with tougher competition than Dillian Whyte has. Because really, the only real fight that Dillian Whyte has been in recent memory was Anthony Joshua. But a guy like Helenius and Malcolm Tan and Lucas Brown are not going to prepare you for a guy like Luis Ortiz. And it's also a nice thing to see Luis Ortiz getting this chance because of how he was actually treated with Matchroom. Because if you guys remember, Luis Ortiz had two fights with Matchroom in back in 2016, and pretty much they were both a month apart. Like some of the best, and actually, man, this guy has really fought some pretty decent heavyweights in Deontay Wilder. Malik Scott is a very expensive cat. Experienced cat. He beat Tony Thompson. And of course, he ruined the career of Brian Jennings. Brian Jennings, who went the distance with Luis Ortiz, but then, with Vladimir Klitschko, but got stopped by Brian Jennings. And that's really when, and of course, old school Monty Barrett, man, he knocked out Monty Barrett. To get a knockout on Monty Barrett, man, he did that in 2014. You really got to be You really do got to be able to fight, man, because Monty Barrett was one of my favorite Road Warrior type of fighters. But, the funny thing was that, Matchroom CEO Eddie Hearn talked about how he had Luis Ortiz for a couple of fights, and he didn't really look that well. He didn't really do that good. He underperformed. So, I went back and I looked at those fights again, and I was like, it was against Malik Scott and David Allen. I think in the Malik Scott fight, there was something like there was three official knockdowns, and I think there was a total of 6 knockdowns total, where the ref didn't count the knockdown and let the guy back up. But then eventually the guy Malik Scott wins by a unanimous decision. Loses by a unanimous decision. But man, truthfully, Malik Scott got the brakes beaten off of him by Luis Ortiz, and then of course David Allen. Dave Allen, that was a 8-round fight. David Allen, honestly, man, has a pretty decent chin, and that was the only thing keeping him afloat. But there was something that I noticed, and of course everybody that watches Luis Ortiz knows that he's got that southpaw stance he has, that really, the heavy hands, man. But the thing that I watch in these fights, which is why I'm telling you, man, this guy will I believe he beats Dillian Whyte. In my opinion, a Dillian Whyte versus Luis Ortiz bout is something like that's like a 70-30. That's like a 70-30 fight. I have a hard time believing Dillian Whyte can get out of there with Luis Ortiz. I think Luis Ortiz versus Joseph Parker, again, is a 70-30 fight. I think that Joseph Parker would have a very, very difficult time with Luis Ortiz. And I've been saying for a while, even if Tyson Fury was absolutely at his best, that he would, that's a 50-50 bout. And quite honestly, man, it might be 55-45 for Luis Ortiz. Luis Ortiz, to me, if you look at some of those fights that he did, the thing that really stood out to me, like even with the Malik Scott bout, was those body shots. His counter left is a counter left uppercut to the body that just is, man, it's just crushing, man. And that could be the reason, and I believe the reason why Dillian Whyte didn't want to take that fight. And it's really good to see him be able to continue to move on, get another payday, keep himself, high in the rankings. Now, while he's definitely getting up there in age, I think right now he might be listed officially at 39. I'm not going to go with all this other stuff about him being 48. That guy's not 48 years old. Okay, if people that say that Luis Ortiz is 48 can stop it. If you think he's 48 years old, that's because you've not been 48 years old. Okay, that's not a 48-year-old man. He might be a year older than what he's listening, 2 years over what he's listening, but just go look at Oliver McCall, man. Oliver McCall is going to be fighting this weekend. Oliver McCall is 53, right? Just a few years older than you guys are claiming that Luis Ortiz is. And actually, man, I think he's fighting tonight. He's fighting tonight against a guy. Who is this guy he's fighting, man? I can't remember what his name is. Rayson Rakowski. Oh man, no, that's not the guy he's fighting. Whoever he's fighting, man. Luis, if you look at Oliver McCall, man, Oliver McCall is 53 years old. Luis Ortiz, but I don't care if Luis Ortiz is 45, 48 years old. He's a 45, 40. Then when he was 43, that really says something bad about these guys, because Luis Ortiz, if he is getting older, let me see how old he was. If he's 53, if he's 48 now, 8 years ago, back in 2010, you're trying to tell me he turned pro when he was 40 years old? Oh my goodness, that is a hell of a fighter, man, to turn pro at 40 years old and he needs to go to the Hall of Fame for that, right? If he was 8 years ago, right? 8 years ago, he turned pro at 31 years old. And that is about right. That's about par for the course for a guy who defected from Cuba, coming out of the Cuban program, and defects later on in his amateur career. He didn't defect from Cuba when he was 40 years old, or when he was 36 years old. He wouldn't have had that. He wouldn't have had that type of longevity in his career, man. He wouldn't have gotten, to 20. He wouldn't have got to 28 fights. But all that stuff aside, if he was, then that was a 40-year-old. That was a 42-year-old. A 42-year-old that beat the brakes up off of Brian Jennings. And at 42 years old, Luis Ortiz of 5 years ago would absolutely spank Dillian Whyte. So all that really says, if people say that Luis Ortiz is that old and discrediting him, is really saying what kind of a bum they think Dillian Whyte is. But Dillian Whyte ducked the fight. So now this cat is back on Showtime, and my hats go off to Showtime for being the type of organization that want to let boxing fans see good fights. Because the one thing that I was worried about for Luis Ortiz was that Luis Ortiz wasn't going to have another opportunity to showcase his skills. And although, like I said, one of the things that I was most nervous about in Deontay Wilder's career was the fact that he was facing somebody as dangerous as Luis Ortiz. Luis Ortiz showed every bit of why I was nervous about it by doing what he did against a guy that was 7 years younger, 3 inches taller, and one of the most devastating punchers in in recent memory. Honestly, I can't think of anybody in the heavyweight division that had a heavier shot than Deontay Wilder since maybe obviously not Sonny Liston, but maybe Ernie Shavers. Right? Guys like Lennox Lewis didn't have that type. Lennox Lewis had a really, really, really good heavy right hand, but it's not that type. It's not that type of just, almost you can set a clock to it, putting you to sleep type of power. And even though you can say these guys weren't the top-notch boxers or whatever, that doesn't mean they got bad chins. So, and the heavyweight division's a knockout division. So anyway, I'm happy for Luis Ortiz. I hope that it puts him in situations where he can continue to get another good fight. I think right now he might be ranked. I believe he's definitely ranked I think he's ranked number 4 in the WBC. So that should allow him to keep his ranking up, keep the paychecks coming. And then hopefully, somebody else like hopefully he can get another shot at the heavyweight title. But it's not coming anywhere anytime soon, because the only way he will get a shot at that is if Deontay Wilder gives him a rematch. Now, I think in a rematch with Luis Ortiz and Deontay Wilder, that knockout might come quicker for Deontay Wilder, because now he's been in the ring with him. He knows what to expect. And, I think he'll be able to do that. But for sure he's not going to get a shot at Anthony Joshua. I wouldn't mind seeing him in there with the Povetkin. That would be funny, just because of the steroid issues. But again, just as long as Luis Ortiz don't pop dirty for nothing, and he keeps going, I'm happy about it, man. And and he's not going anywhere. So, and it doesn't appear as if the WBC has removed that requirement from Dillian Whyte to face him. So if Dillian Whyte really does want that shot at Deontay Wilder, then, hey, man, you got to step up and fight Luis Ortiz, and then you would lose, and you go back to Great Britain. You know what I mean? Or the fight can be in the fight would be in the United States, because Eddie Hearn can't win a purse bid. Ain't going to win a purse bid against whoever. As soon as they have that purse bid, Epic Sports is going to come in there like, hey, here's this. And then that'll take that away from him. But anyway, it is what it is. Congratulations, Luis Ortiz. That really does help the card for Mikey Garcia and Robert Easter. And with that, I'm out. Peace.